Airbnb, VRBO, and other short-term rentals can be an insanely profitable business to break into, but it can also completely drain your savings. People often talk about the benefits of owning an investment property and listing it for short-term rental, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. If you're looking to get started with Airbnb or VRBO style investment properties, you may not have thought about these 4 things that could make or break your investment. Hi, I'm Ian, and I have spent years helping short-term property investors throughout the US secure the financing they need to expand their portfolio. The first thing you need to do is consider the neighborhood or the community that you're buying in. Right now, the real estate market is in a state of flux, with prices rising and falling dramatically depending on where in the US the property is located. And the same goes for the short-term rental market. It's not as guaranteed as it used to be that there is always going to be a high demand for booking these properties. You need to choose a market that has a great short-term rental demand, but that also has a solid and reliable long-term rental demand, so that you do have a plan B if the short-term rental demand falls significantly. And that's why location is so important. Make sure the property is in a great neighborhood for more than the obvious reasons and the reasons we've just talked about. A lot of the time, you can actually get better loan terms from lenders if the property could be used as a long-term rental property. This doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't use the property as a short-term rental as you intended. We just try to qualify it as a long-term rental for the purposes of the loan. And what I mean by qualify it is that the long-term market rents on appraisal will be high enough to cover the DSCR that we need for the loan. So if we can qualify it as a long-term rental, we can usually get higher LTVs, lower rates, and a slightly less stringent underwriting process than we would for a short-term rental, but you could still use the property as a short-term rental. This is another reason why it would be wise to choose a market for your short-term rental purchase that also has a solid market for long-term rentals, so we can get those higher market long-term rents. You may also want to buy in a place that has a good mid-term rental market. These are ideal in seasonal locations and areas near hospitals or military bases, places like that. Think of people like traveling nurses, for instance. They're usually looking for a mid-term lease that's fully furnished, near the hospital where they work, and they're willing to pay a higher amount every month because either they're well paid for their work or sometimes the hospital covers some of their bills. Where I live on the coast of the Carolinas, there's a lot of investors that do short-term like Airbnb in the summer or on months, and then do mid-term in the winter or off months. Your cash flow will be more regular and your investment will be more profitable if you consider all the revenue opportunities, including using the property for mid-term rentals. And finally, understand there's a lot involved with owning and operating a short-term rental property. I'm sure you've heard this before, but truly take the time to sit down and figure out how you're actually going to manage this property. Let's say your B&B'er calls at 2 a.m. about a busted pipe. How are you going to manage that? Do you have someone you can call? There are short-term rental property managers that you can hire that take a percentage of the rental income, but they run the property for you. Usually, their fees range anywhere from about 10% to 35%. But aside from the day-to-day maintenance and upkeep of the property, part of their job is to also increase bookings, so they increase revenue. So their commissions could be offset by that higher revenue, so there's a greater return on investment overall. So you definitely want to strategize before getting into it, how and when your property is going to be managed, so you're prepared for the time and the cost that's involved. So what do you think? Are you ready to take the plunge into investment properties? There's definitely a lot involved with being a property investor, and it can be overwhelming. That's why I try to simplify everything as much as possible here on my YouTube channel. Subscribe, and I'll see you soon.